Okay, so this video has been brewing for a long time. I really put off making it for two very good reasons. The first being that I'm a professional, I have therapeutic clients, and I have a real commitment to their well-being. If you know anything about therapeutic boundaries, you'll know this is kind of a gray area around how much you can personally disclose around your life. But on that note, all my clients are actually really great, really mature. Most of them have actually done psychedelics themselves, or they are quite serious meditators and they have really gone into the psychedelic realm without psychedelics. I've also worked for some big meditation apps, both Calm and Open. I've done like corporate meditation stuff, and I actually went with Jeff Warren, kind of a big meditation teacher, into the RCMP, which is like the Canadian version of the FBI, to teach a mindfulness seminar. And I don't know if I would be invited to that type of thing again after making this video. The other very good reason why I avoided making this video is because I really don't want people to think that psychedelics are necessary for their growth. Psychedelics absolutely are not for everyone. And on top of that, they are not very accessible. There are many places where you have to take risks just to acquire psychedelics. And then you're taking a risk also to use them if they're illegal there. And then you might be also taking a risk if you don't have the proper psychological support around you in doing it. And then if you do have access to real kind of licensed therapeutic psychedelic use, that is often extremely expensive and very few people can actually afford that. And what really inspires me, what really gets me going, is making healing practices more accessible to people. It's the people who are often the least resourced who most need the healing. And so that's why on my channel, I've tried to make healing and growth practices and understanding around these things extremely accessible. And that's why I'm also making this big free resource on my channel to really support people in their healing, growth, well-being. And for the regulars who watch my channel, I really don't want them to feel pressured or that I am pushing psychedelics at all. This is something that you really have to come to on your own. You really have to decide for yourself whether it's the right thing for you. Nobody can make that decision for you. Get well informed, do your research, and make the decision that really resonates with you. And of course, be safe. So all that being said, the reason why I did decide to make this video is because I really do feel it's time. The times are changing and we need more mature voices in the scene. We need more people talking about the realities of psychedelics. And I have a lot of experience in the realities of psychedelics. So there's a lot I have to say on this. And for this video, I really boiled it down to the key points, just giving you the real solid gold. But if this type of thing interests you, please subscribe and especially sign up for my newsletter, because I'm going to be doing a lot more videos in this vein that's going to explore these themes and other aspects of psychedelic use and healing in much more depth. So subscribe, sign up to the newsletter to keep posted on more. Now, I'm also making this video because I actually work in the psychedelic world. I've been writing guided practices like guided healing meditations to be used in psychedelic therapy for two of the largest psychedelic therapy providers, both Field Trip and Mind Bloom. And while it's really amazing work and I'm honored to be doing it, the scope is quite narrow and I feel like I have a lot more to say. And so this video really holds my wish in the direction in which I really truly hope to see the psychedelic world moving. So if you work in the world of psychedelics, if you have any influence in this, please take these ideas to heart. Please explore them, because this is really what I feel like needs more emphasis and more exploration so people can have deeper healing and have more growth in their psychedelic experiences and beyond. So the first big idea here is that community is key. And I know the use of psychedelics being used therapeutically is really in its infancy, that to get FDA approval and to really show that these things work clinically, we need to have very controlled environments. But the way that psychedelic therapy is currently being done in the Western world, which is essentially one-on-one therapeutic use, is really limiting the healing potential. Now, I can really say that one of the things that really drew me to ayahuasca and really kept me working with it was the community around it. Coming together with people to do healing work, it's a very vulnerable thing, and it really opens up a different type of relationship. It's not so much that the people you meet on retreat are different than people you normally meet. It's that you're meeting them at a very powerful time in their lives, a very vulnerable time. And it changes the types of conversations you have. People are going through a deep healing process, a deep process of self-reflection, and they're talking about it. And just being there to listen to other people, to support them through your presence, through just simply listening to them, is a big gift for them and for you. Being able to support others in their healing journey is in itself healing. It really models a different way of relating to people. You know, the world has never been so crowded, and yet people feel so isolated. And the reason is not because of the proximity we have to people. It's because we don't know how to be vulnerable with people. We don't know how to bring up the real important issues and have conversations around them. Yes, therapy has, become popular, but to have these deeper conversations with friends and groups of friends, that's still a relatively new thing, and we don't really see that modeled for us in pop culture. Pop culture is still very superficial, it's still very materialistic, and so it is such a breath of fresh air to engage with people in such a vulnerable, meaningful way when we're really talking about what's going on with us truly on the deepest level. We talk about our pains, our insecurities, our deepest wishes and hopes, our disappointments, all of these things. Yes, it's great to have these types of conversations with a therapist, but having these conversations with peers, people who are like us, who are not paid to be there for us, but who are just really there because they care. That is such a powerful experience. And considering most traumas have a relational component to them, the fact that we've been harmed by others, it really makes people hesitant to trust others, to open up to others. So by going into an environment where we're all kind of nervous and doing this scary thing together, but we're all very sincerely there for healing or wanting to make meaningful change in our lives, that sets up the perfect atmosphere to have real human, meaningful relationships with others. And then these relationships obviously carry on beyond the psychedelic experiences, and they can be essential in helping with integration. And that's something I'll touch on more later, is about the real challenge of integration and how that's not really talked about as much as it should be. That the challenges to integration are so much deeper than I hear anyone else talking about. So I'll get to that in a bit. But community has always been essential for healing. If you look into past societies, past cultures, community has been the way in which people heal. The thing about us humans is we integrate into the culture around us. So if we're in a superficial culture, we're naturally going to think in more superficial ways. But if we're in a culture that has healing as a core value, then we're naturally just going to start to heal. We're naturally going to start to feel more trusting and open and accepting of whatever's happening for us internally, and be able to express ourselves honestly and heal through the relationships and support we get from others, and also heal by giving support to others. And there are so many more reasons why I really feel like psychedelics are best done in community. Another is the accessibility issue, that if you're doing one-on-one, then you have usually a licensed professional that you're paying a lot of money to be there for you. Now, in like a retreat format, there could be one licensed professional, many participants, and then a mix of unlicensed professionals, interns, volunteers, and such. Because the reality is you don't need many years of school to know how to support someone in their healing. There are so many people who are really well equipped and really desire to be of help to others who don't have the resources to do all the school. And quite frankly, they don't need all that schooling. You can have training programs that are only a few days or a few weeks long that can really show people how to be of support to others. And this is what we really need, is more people who are working to support others. And I know so many people who have the calling to do it, who would be amazing supports in these types of contexts, who just don't have the resources to go to school and are therefore working jobs that they find meaningless when really they would love to be supporting people, and we need them to be supporting people. We just don't have the social structures set up in a way that supports that at this time. The other thing about community is it gives us so much strength. If you've ever done these like all-day workshops with groups of people, you'll notice that you have a lot more energy and strength, and you're able to show up in a much better way when there's other people there that are present with you, that are holding you accountable, but also that you care about. You can get far more done and feel far more supported in what you're doing in a group than on your own. And this is why spiritual traditions have always emphasized community. That deep healing work and deep growth work is very difficult. It's extremely difficult to do on your own. And the support of a community really helps to break through the barriers that we've been struggling with and makes all the difference. Community is key. So we absolutely need more healing communities, and making healing communities based around therapeutic psychedelic use is a no-brainer. This absolutely must be done. I'm confident it will be done, but let's try to get it done sooner rather than later. The next big lesson here is that it's more than just healing. It's also about initiation, self-realization, even self-transcendence. Yes, many people come to psychedelics for healing, but even those who come specifically for healing often end up getting a lot more out of it. And so we need to update our models or frameworks in which we look at psychedelic experience, and this will allow us to better support people in their growth in whatever comes up for them in sessions. So while people often come for healing, Healing can also be an initiation, and it usually is an initiation. And so what is an initiation? Initiations signify a change in one's life and a change in one's identity structure. Essentially, our identity is a reflection of our values, which is a reflection of how we spend our time and energy. And through different phases of life, we have different values, essentially different priorities that are really essential for our growth and development and well-being. So when we're young, it's really important to find a sense of belonging in culture, to find friend groups often organized around certain types of interests. And because of this need for belonging, this need for connection with others, we take the culture out there and we internalize it. It's like I grew up skateboarding, so I really identified with a skateboarder. And I listened to the same types of music that other skateboarders listen to. I used the same slang that other skateboarders used. But at a certain point in my life, that identity became insufficient. It became really limiting. And even though I never actually quit skateboarding, I had to give up a lot of the identity aspects of the skateboarder. Carl Jung talked extensively about this process as he went through it himself and developed a lot of his psychology around it. That at a certain point, our identity or sense of self becomes limiting. It stops working for us. It no longer brings the sense of belonging and satisfaction it used to. And then there's a calling to really let go of it and discover a more authentic, or more creative, or more unique sense of self. Jung called this process individuation, which is really the perfect word for it, because you are finding your own individual sense of self. You're individuating from whatever the culture is that you grew up around, from whatever the peer group is that you identified with, and you're finding your own unique values and your own unique expression. So initiations are things that start to soften or could even break the structure in our psyche around who we think we are, what our core values are, what the driving forces in our life are. And they create an opening for self-discovery or self-realization. Now, many forms of initiation traditionally are actually quite traumatic, but they're done in a safe, supported container with a lot of intention. They feel supported enough to integrate their experience and not dissociate from it. And so there's not the same anxiety and distress and confusion that comes from what we normally think of as trauma. And so when people have traumatic experiences and there's support in the integration of them, these are often initiatory experiences where people have more self-realization. They get more of a sense of who they really are and what they want to be in the world. What role really truly fits with who they are. So I've seen people having these types of initiatory experiences so much through psychedelic experiences. People will often end up realizing that they actually need to make a career change, or move on from a relationship, or move on from a friend group. And these changes are so difficult to make because we are really not supported to make these changes in our culture. Our culture really pressures us to really just chase career aspirations and social status. But what I see happening for people in their psychedelic experiences is that there's a calling to a more meaningful life where they can have a more meaningful connection with other people, and often a more meaningful connection with nature, with the world at large. It's often a shift away from values of more personal success, like career success, financial success, social status, that type of thing, to values that are really aligned with the collective well-being. And again, this shift in values takes us away from a more isolated, more meaningless sense of existence to a more connected, more meaningful sense of existence. And these are deep changes that are happening within people that take time and support. And it's always so extremely difficult. If you're going through this yourself, you know it's very difficult. It sounds like it should be easy to just make a career switch or something like this, but man, this is always difficult. There's a ton of great psychologists and researchers who talk about this a lot. Robert Kegan, a Harvard psychologist, explores this in real clinical depth in his book, The Evolving Self. One of my personal favorite authors is James Hollis, who's a Jungian, but just a really brilliant guy, brilliant writer who's been working in this field a long time and really focuses on the challenges of undergoing this transition, which he calls the middle life passage into true adulthood or mature adulthood. And then Bill Plotkin is another favorite of mine who's just absolutely brilliant and has done really deep work in this field with individuals and has written a number of books. Soulcraft was the book for me that really first opened my eyes to this, but his newest book, The Journey of Soul Initiation, goes far more into depth. So I'd really love to see more of the integration of these ideas into the psychedelic world. I know, of course, there are already people doing this, but it really needs to be more common. It really needs to be normalized, that people understand what they're getting into, they understand what they're going through, so they're not so confused and they can at least find the resources that are going to support them through the process. Another big learning through my psychedelic journeys has been the power of movement, specifically the power of ecstatic movement and often shaking. Now, I noticed in my ayahuasca journeys, I would start to just naturally shake. It felt very normal. I would start shaking out like the chronic tension in my hips. And after ceremonies, I'd feel a lot more open. And that just started building more and more. And I can tell you, any raver, anyone who goes to these festivals and does psychedelics and dances all night knows the power of moving with psychedelics. Somatic psychology is basically mainstream now. We know that trauma, we know that emotions are stored in the body. And what better way to get them out than to shake them out? So for me, someone who carries a lot of chronic tension, this type of shaking and movement has been completely essential to my well-being. And I think just intuitively, we all know it makes sense. Dancing or movement is just so good for our well-being. It is so healthy for us. Anyone who dances or moves regularly knows this. And it is so much more powerful when you're also using psychedelics with it, especially with a group. Now, this just happens organically in cultures. People come together and dance in pretty much every culture. And since psychedelics hit the Western world, people have been dancing on LSD, MDMA, all sorts of psychedelics. Now, I find the work of Bradford Keeney, a psychologist, extremely interesting. He's written many books, but his book, Shaking Medicine, really opened my eyes to the power of shaking as a spiritual practice, as a practice for our growth and well-being, and also really a practice for healing. He talks about many different cultures, specifically the Kalahari Bushmen, who shake as a spiritual practice, also as a healing practice. And he was actually initiated into this tradition and just has amazing stories, his own and telling other people's stories, and really exploring shaking as a spiritual practice in many different cultures. So yes, people are already doing psychedelics and dancing together, but I would love to see it used therapeutically and formalized, where people come together with a really clear intention, where the space is really held in a compassionate and supporting way, where people can come together, do psychedelics, and dance all night for healing, for self-realization, for spiritual or self-contemplation. Festivals and raves are kind of a mess. There's all sorts of different types of people there with different types of intentions, but to really come together with everybody on the same page with the same intention to create a community around these events that really supports each other in their growth, in their self-expression. This is something I would love to see, and I'm honestly would be excited to participate. So I really hope that this starts to take off soon. We have obviously the science supporting somatic psychology, even things like dance therapy. We really need some more studies around psychedelics and ecstatic movement so we can begin to facilitate these things formally, legally, and hopefully they can be really normalized, that more people can have access to these types of events and practices. So yes, there's very much a wish here to see intentional, facilitated, ecstatic movement into the psychedelic world. While movement is the big one for me, I also think singing and breathing, breathwork, breathing together, doing the breath work together are also extremely powerful practices that we can integrate into collective psychedelic experiences. I've had a lot of amazing experiences with kirtan or in the Santo Daime tradition where everyone sings together. It is such a powerful practice. It's so much beyond words. I can't even begin to describe the impact it's had on me, and I've seen it have on others. So singing is another big one we should integrate. And then also forms of breath work. As breathwork is very much a somatic practice, it very much changes and opens our energy. It can help really create a collective connection, bring us into a collective state of consciousness. And through that connection with the group, our healing and transformation is very much supported. These things happen much more easily, much more organically. This really comes back to the power of community. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and one of the things I tell people when they ask for advice going into their first psychedelic experience, it's to learn to really trust yourself, to learn to really trust your own intuitive sense of what you need in the moment. Often we're confused, we're not sure what we're doing, so we look to others for guidance, for support. And it's really great when we have others that we can count on, when we have community that we can count on. But ultimately, we have to be true to ourselves, and we have to discover what our own truth is. And there's been so many times where I've felt a certain way, and then I ask someone who's like a supposed authority in the field, and they tell me this certain way of doing things, and then I try that and it doesn't work. And then I find that my own way is actually the way that really works best. I've had such amazing mentors in my life, and I'm so grateful for them. But one of the biggest things that they've all given me is that they've shown me that I actually know the truth for myself, that I can actually direct my own experience, direct my own life. And really the only sense of direction I can count on is my own. And so yes, I know this can be very difficult because we have such conflicting feelings and ideas and desires. It can be difficult to locate what is the part that really knows best for yourself. We often have parts that are driven by fear, driven by desire, and those parts will often not lead us down the best path. We really have to tune in to our highest wisdom, and that takes a lot of trial and error usually. And so you should really start exploring this now. You should really start asking yourself, what do you need? And really start tuning in and trying to listen to the wisdom that presents itself. You can try out different things in life, see how they land, see how it feels, and really honor the resonance that it has for you. Don't try to make something work if it's not working. Instead, find the thing that does resonate with you. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Finding our truth, our real expression in life is not easy, but when it's authentic, when it's what we really feel called to be doing, then we get a lot more energy to do it. Our whole being is able to really show up for those difficulties. So it's not that things get easier, it's just that we become stronger. We become more resilient. And when you really honor yourself, honor your truest, deepest sense of values, that's when everything else starts to align in your life. When people start to connect with and follow that inner guidance, that's when the healing will often start happening organically. I've seen this time and time again with clients. I've seen it with myself, that the degree of healing we can do in our current life circumstances is often very limited, but the more we align with who we really are and what we really care about, the more things open for us, the more we really ground into the world, into our being, and that allows a much deeper healing, a much deeper sense of growth to start to happen. And so really learning to trust your own inner sense of what's right and wrong for you, to really cultivate your own inner sense of authority instead of looking for authority out there. That is one of the most fundamentally valuable things that I have learned, and which I really try to impart on everyone that I engage with or work with. So another big thing that comes up is integration, the challenge and reality of integration. And this is almost like a buzzword right now in the psychedelic world. Everyone's talking about integration, but it really took me a long time to really understand what integration is and to also really understand why it is so damn difficult. So in a very simplistic way, you can look at integration as this idea that we are looking for some change to happen through our psychedelic use. We usually go to psychedelics because we want to be at least a little bit different on the other side. And unfortunately, a lot of the insights we get through psychedelic experiences aren't so easily integrated into our lives. Yes, psychedelics can provide this amazing opening, this softening of our inner barriers and boundaries, this possibility of change, of releasing old, deeply held things to open to new possibilities of being. But there are two major problems that arise often. The first is that opening that we experience with the psychedelic experience often closes back up for the most part. And it's really easy to go back to old habits, old ways of thinking, old ways of feeling. And so in that opening that we have, we really have to start to make the changes that we want to see happen in our lives. And the tools and strategies for that aren't always clear. I think because for a lot of us, the changes are really unique to us. And so there's not really a standardized way in which we can look at creating change. But also the other big thing is that we are not really supported by our community and culture to make these changes. So as humans, we naturally kind of adopt the worldview of our peers, of the culture that we grow up in. And right now, most of the values are very individualistic. They're very success driven, that, you have a nice life, you have a nice house, you have success at work, you have social status, whatever it is. And these values are, inherently pretty unsatisfying. Achieving things, achieving more success or more status can feel really good in a moment, but it doesn't satisfy, the feeling doesn't last, and it just leaves us craving more. So we get this wrong idea that more will make us happy. We think, if a little bit of success makes me a little bit happy, then a lot of success must make me really happy. But the reality is that's just not true. Every bit of success comes with a little bit of dopamine, which then just wears off. And then we go back to our baseline, unsatisfied, and chase whatever thing we think will bring us some satisfaction, usually, again, chasing things up the wrong trees. Now, people often get this insight when doing psychedelics. They just naturally realize, I've been chasing the wrong thing. And they get a sense of what would really make them happy, really lead to a more meaningful life, a sense of real fulfillment. And again, these are usually things around collective well-being. It's around having a meaningful impact on other people or a meaningful impact on the natural world. But the problem is these values are pretty rare in normal society. And so as we go back into normal society, it's really easy to fall back into that value system. And again, this is why we need community. We need to build communities with more meaningful values. Communities that support the well-being of the individual, but also the well-being of the collective. And I really feel like that's what true integration means. True integration is not just changing your inner world, but changing how you relate to the outer world. And so I really feel for everyone who isn't connected into one of these communities that has these better values and feels a sense of isolation, like they don't fit in with the culture around them. And so many problems arise in the world because to organize events, you need spaces, and spaces cost money, and then it brings money back into things. It's really difficult in a materialist kind of capitalist society to live from a value system that values the collective well-being and not my own personal financial well-being. So of course we have to strike a balance. We have to find what works for us. We're in this weird liminal space. We realize that our old culture is not meeting our needs, but we have not yet created a new culture. So in a sense, many of us are pioneers starting to co-create this new culture. And we really need more hands on deck to support this, to make this shift from an old materialistic culture to one that really cares about individual and collective well-being. All right, this video is getting kind of long, so I'm going to do some more future videos exploring these ideas and more, a lot more in depth. I will be talking a lot about the problems and challenges that come with a shift of identity and a shift of values, how people often get sucked into the new age spiritual culture, which in some ways is a bit better, but in other ways can be just as or more limiting when it comes to finding our own authentic self-expression and authentic values that we want to live out. I'll talk about common issues I've seen arise and even personally experienced, like, for example, the Messiah complex, how psychedelics can actually inflate our ego and bring us this sense of grandiosity where we can actually get lost in this ego projection of who we think we are, and it actually only serves to disconnect us to others. And I have a whole theory around why I think this happens so often. And I'll also talk more about some of my personal experiences and the bizarre, weird mystery of existence, and how psychedelics have absolutely impacted my worldview and just my general sense of everything. And also talk about the therapeutic and meditative practices that can support our well-being before, during, and after psychedelic experiences. So again, if these things interest you, please subscribe, especially sign up for the newsletter. I'm going to have a lot of announcements there. I'm also forming a community on Patreon where I'm going to be doing live events, discussions, mini workshops, meditations, all this type of thing. So if that interests you to get involved in this community where we can support each other in our growth, then you can check out my Patreon link below. And just thank you very much for tuning in. It's been great to share, and thank you so much for listening.